it's important for everybody because you produce growth hormones at night and you can't produce growth hormones. We've talked about this before, I think, on the cardiovascular side. Cardiovascular repair only happens when you sleep.
That deep sleep. Yeah.
Should nuclear capabilities exist in that region of the world?
I think the world is more dangerous as more countries come on with nuclear capabilities. See, Saudi Arabia believes that the Palestinians should have a separate state within those borders, and they need to be recognized and they need to be considered a player. Israel, of course, will have no part of that.
If Saudi Arabia comes out and acknowledges that, and then that forces Israel's hand to slice a chunk of land, and then you create a state called Palestine, what more are you going to argue about now at this point in that area? Because those are the biggest contentions: is the Palestinians don't have a place to stay. No one's acknowledging them as an official. Their own people don't acknowledge them by and large by a lot. And then you have Iran in here, who seems like is always the one who's going to muddy the waters. And we aren't even talking about the past stuff. So I think it is putting a lot of I think that it's putting a lot of pressure on Israel more than anybody.
The benefit of being a person who uses deal making in a public way is that people can see that you're the person that made these things happen, right? So a person with Trump's personality characteristics, that makes sense because he's a narcissist. And because he's a narcissist, he wants to be able to take the credit. But he's also understanding that if it doesn't go through, he's going to take the blame as well. So where he is right now is he's very, very unpopular in the United States. But if he can be seen as a person who's able to be a core lever in pushing more peace in the Middle East, then he's going to get the credit, deservedly so. And so if you're going to have transparency, you also have to be willing to face the music. And if you don't have the willingness to face the music, then you've got to negotiate in public, operate in classified ways in private, and figure out strategically how to balance those things. It's been one of our biggest trading partners. And I think it ruins or it tarnishes the relationship that we have with them. So I'm in agreement with the fact that there should be increased tariffs to if there's a corresponding benefit that comes back to the United States outside of just extra revenues being generated. Because ultimately, as I've said before, an increased tariff on Canada is going to trickle down to the American people. And at the end of the day, affordability is already an issue.
The entry point now is $200,000 to $250,000. If you're not making $200,000 to $250,000 a year, you can't buy a house anymore now.
Yeah. To your point, the Democrats, what they have going against them is take me to your leader. I don't know who to take him to because there's no leader that the Democratic Party has.
Can you do that one more time? Invasion of Mars. Right. Mars invades.
Exactly. And so the Democratic Party has no leadership. And so how can the people who are informed really have faith in the Democratic Party when there's no established leader?
Welcome to the Family Office, planning for the people who matter most.
If the numbers make a difference.
Yeah, we'll do that. Okay. So I know it. I know the difference. I know the difference when I get up in the morning. If the room was dark or light, if there's any light in that room, I know the difference in the quality of the sleep. And I know with the frequency when if I can get up in the morning and I'm like, dang, I don't remember anything after I went to bed. I'm like, that was a good one. That was a good one. And I know because the room is cold and it's dark. So you ought to try that if you're listening.
Do you have blackout curtains?
I don't. I have shutters and they do a really good job.
Okay. Yeah,
as long as they're, with shutters, they gotta kind of, you can't just shut them. You gotta, there's that last
click. Yeah.
Is that last edge you gotta push and you'll know because they'll go click, 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 almost like a good keyboard clicks, you know? Yep. And that's when you know. And it's important more so for guys than women because men, it's important for everybody because you produce growth hormones at night and you can't produce growth hormones. We've talked about this before, I think, but on the cardiovascular side. Cardiovascular repair only happens when you sleep.
That deep sleep. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyways.
Yeah, man. And I think another thing to add to that is the importance of having your cell phone in a different room if you don't have any self-control, or if you do have self-control, turning it upside down so you don't get that blue light.
I put it on airplane mode and I put it in the bathroom and I charge it in the bathroom because the airplane mode works. I've heard a lot about that, but I put it in airplane mode and I don't put it next to me anymore. Because I used to be one of those people that would fall asleep with it like this because but
absolutely.
The
crackberries when the blackberries were out. It's just,
crackberry. You're showing your age with that one because most people today won't even know what that means, by the way. But that was the original. I would say crackberry is today's doom scroll.
Right. Absolutely.
That's what that
no
is.
doubt. That's a good way to put it.
So anyways, Len, a lot going on today. A lot going on. A lot. I did want to say that you'd be proud of me. I did some homework and I did realize something that it is the JCPOA, right?
That is correct.
And here's what I realized. And again, there's so many stark key differences between this and the MOU, right? This is, let me just read it to you, what these beautiful letters stand for, and then you tell me if this makes any sense.
Okay.
Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action.
It's just a fancy way of saying MOU.
Only a liberal could come up with something like that, Len. And Obama's not even that liberal. And I like Obama. I'm an Obama fan. I think he did a good job for the most part, as any president can do. But seriously, what we should have seen this coming when we seen what it actually meant.
Well, the reality is as we talked about last podcast, so far the JCPOA, from my perspective, has been more effective. And so, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole because we said we were not going to talk about Iran.
I'm not tempting you.
Okay.
No, that was the last one.
Yes,
that was the last one.
Okay. But let's talk adjacent because with the Saudi agreement, there was this Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the United States nuclear deal. I am really curious to hear your perspective on it because, of course, Iran is connected to all of this. But where do you stand on it? What are your thoughts about it?
I think it couldn't have come sooner.
Okay.
I think this is exactly what needed to happen 20, 30, 40. These types of negotiations. I wasn't in the room and I haven't done enough history research to realize it.
Okay.
One of the things I've been doing lately, Len, is I've been researching Latin America history and culture immensely.
Okay.
And it was prompted obviously because of World Cup stuff.
Sure.
There's a lot of stuff about Latin America that I didn't realize. Like you're like, whoa. Like this is intense. There's a lot of intense history, and I don't
very complicated history in Latin America.
And the world doesn't really ever talk about a lot of it, right? That's going on.
At least not here in North America, that's for sure.
Of course. But what they talk about in Europe is the fact that they don't know how to air condition their buildings and their houses, and it's America's fault. But we don't want to get into that either. It's always America's fault. It's always America's fault. But at any rate, I think it's two clear differences.
Okay.
The MOU and the JCPOA.
The Joint Comprehensive.
Yes. Let's make up a very long name so we have jobs. That's just
so it. We were going to talk about Saudi Arabia and Israel and the United States.
Yes. So here's the key difference.
Okay.
The JCPOA and the MOU, they have the MOU has a few more things that it has to accomplish because we weren't in, at the time, kinetic. It was more of like a underground kind of war stuff going on.
Okay.
Obama liked that. Obama liked doing the surgical strikes, drone strikes. He liked using special forces. Obama was a special forces military guy, which is in itself very tactical, but at the same time very, very scary if you think about, from a communist or socialist standpoint, because, the government has to be in secrecy all the time. That just means it's just weird. But I don't want to keep digressing.
Clandestine operations.
Yeah, okay, clandestine operations, even though the US is really good at it. And Israel, we're all good at it. Russia's good at it too. The key difference is that one prevents a country from enriching uranium and building uranium to build weapons. And one country, while they're both I don't know. You want to say shady? I don't know how to describe it. Well, they're both unscrupulous or a little bit on the fringe. Iran is clearly way. If you were to compare Saudi Arabia and Iran is on the way fringe. Okay. Saudi Arabia is like, hey, we want to play ball in the modern world, but we still want to do weird, I don't want to say it's Sharia law stuff, but they want to, wear the stuff and women don't have rights, all that comes with that area of the world.
Okay.
Saudi Arabia is simple. It's a civil deal. It's civil infrastructure. They want to build nuclear power plants. They want to do because they need it. And it's not because, we want nuclear energy. They know, and everybody knows that they need desalination. And this is something that you and I have talked about a lot. They're not going to be able to power desalination properly and infrastructure properly with solar and wind. And they know that. So nuclear is the only clear alternative. And I think that if this gets done correctly, and the nice thing is America's going to do it. America's going to lead it. America's going to oversee it, and the allies. And in that, I think that you see there's money that we're a capitalist country. So we're operating.
There's no value judgment. I'm just saying,
that's our character, right? Like there's a saying, I don't want to keep going, Len, and give you time, but there's a saying that said that every person is born with their character. And the more you try to fight your character to do something that's not natural to your character, the more you're not going to enjoy it. It's like athletes who become athletes and they never become great because they really weren't ever supposed to become athletes, right? Like clearly Gavin Newsom should have been a politician because he's really good at it. But anyways, one is a civil deal to promote civil construction for infrastructure. The other prevents a country who clearly has said death to a lot of people, not just America, and has funded proxy wars and has clearly said they want to kill people with nukes. That's the difference. One doesn't want to play ball with everyone else, and the other does. And one's a civil thing, and one's to prevent a bad actor from getting a nuclear weapon. That I think is the biggest difference on the table today. Okay. Now, critics can say, Len, but that opens the door, obviously, for Iran, for Saudi Arabia to then, because if human nature, who's to stop them from enriching uranium now at this point, right?
That's the biggest counter. Complicated. It is definitely complicated.
Let me ask you this, Len. Is any Middle Eastern country, and I'm not trying to judge or throw shade, what is the opinion of, should any Middle Eastern country possess this ability? Should actually take countries out of it. Should nuclear capabilities exist in that region of the world?
Okay, so this is how I look at it. There's a lot of moving parts to what you said, and I'm going to try to break each of them down succinctly. So the last question you said is, should any Middle Eastern country have nuclear capabilities? I think the world is more dangerous as more countries come on with nuclear capability. So, because the thing is once you develop the technology to have commercial grade nuclear, all you have to do is make little adjustments so you can make nuclear grade adjustments. And so one thing I think that happened is the world saw that North Korea decided on its own to build nuclear weapons. And because of that, the moment they came online with the nuclear weapon, they got respect for everybody else. Why? Because peace through strength is a tactic that anybody can logically use to deter other people from bullying them around. The reason why Saudi Arabia depends on the United States is because of our nuclear weaponry and our arsenal. And so the main reason why they have a relationship with us is because they benefit from our protection. The reason why we decided to play ball with them is because they're a major player in the world stage as it relates to oil. And so if they agree to our terms with oil, it makes it more preferable because oil is controlled by the petrodollar, which ultimately comes back to the United States. Now, here's another wrinkle in the equation. The wrinkle is that the United States, I don't know if you heard this or not, but just recently, I think within the last 24 to 48 hours, Trump kind of stepped back on the agreement because he said the one condition that you need to concede to is Saudi Arabia. You need to agree that Israel is a state and it has a right to exist, and you need to validate their existence. Saudi Arabia has never done that. Why? Because there's always been this interesting relationship between Saudi Arabia and Palestine. See, Saudi Arabia believes that the Palestinians should have a separate state within those borders, and they need to be recognized and they need to be considered a player. Israel, of course, will have no part of that. Now, here's the problem. What Saudi Arabia doesn't like about Palestine is that Hezbollah has a relationship with Palestine, and Hezbollah and Iran are friends, and Iran and Saudi Arabia are enemies. And because Iran wants control over the Middle East, and so does Saudi Arabia. They want to be a major player, but Saudi Arabia does not have the nuclear arsenal that Iran has. So there's always going to be this tension. And the lever that exists between all of these parties is the United States relationship with Israel. So let me try to break it down simply. Is that President Trump is saying to Saudi Arabia, hey, you need to acknowledge Israel's right to exist and that they are an official state. And Saudi Arabia has said, okay, if we do that, the only way we're going to do that is if Israel decides to allow Palestine to have the right amount of land in that area. And so now there's always going to be this rub. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out, because when Trump up the stakes and up the ante, what he's trying to do is he's trying to create more stability in the region. But there's so many competing and conflicting interests that is so muddy. So I have no idea how this is all going to unfold, but it is going to be interesting to say the least, because every player has leverage in this whole thing. The United States has leverage because they have nuclear power. Saudis have leverage because they want to make sure that they continue with this relationship with the oil. And they also have leverage because of the fact that they have a mutually beneficial relationship with Palestine. Israel has leverage because they have a great ally in the United States. And so it's really, really convoluted and complicated.
I really think that the person who's probably getting the most pressure now in this situation right now is probably Netanyahu.
I would agree with that.
And to me, it almost seems like Trump is laying down the cards and the pieces to form that coalition that I have said that I think has been happening for a very long time. I don't think you can get peace in those areas unless you have coalitions or you have allegiances.
Yeah, like to NATO that point, the Abraham Accords, they want Saudi to officially be a part of it.
Yeah, I was going to say that the United States President Trump wants them to be a part of the Abraham Accords. So if he linchpins something like that, if something like that gets accomplished there, you're looking at the groundwork of what could potentially be a peace or an era of peace in that region. If you get that, because the only way it's going to work is if everybody has allegiances. And of course, the Saudis want control because they still have ancient roots too. And, by forcing that move and them acknowledging that, that's if Saudi Arabia comes out and acknowledges that, and then and that forces Israel's hand to slice a chunk of land, and then you create a state called Palestine, what more are you going to argue about now at this point in that area? Because those are the biggest contentions: is the Palestinians don't have a place to stay. No one's acknowledging them as an official. Their own people don't acknowledge them by and large by a lot. And then you have Iran in here, who seems like is always the one who's going to muddy the waters. And we aren't even talking about the past stuff. So I think it is putting a lot of putting a lot of pressure on Israel more than anybody.
I agree. But I also would say there's a lot of pressure on Saudi Arabia too, because they're catching it from both sides. Here's the reason why. The United States is saying, so the United States is saying, Saudi Arabia, you need to be a part of the Abraham Accords. If Saudi Arabia decides to be a part of the Abraham Accords, it necessarily presupposes that they recognize Israel as, an official entity. They've never done that. And the reason why is, if you think about this, do you know where the most religious place on earth is for the Muslim community?
Tell me.
It's called Mecca. Do you know where Mecca is?
Tell
It's
me.
in Saudi Arabia. And so because of that, so Saudi Arabia has a religious tension because the Muslim world is really at odds with Israel for so many reasons. And so then, but Saudi Arabia is saying, look, we want to be a player economically. And the only way they can be a player economically is they have to be able to diversify out of their oil, because the only way to diversify out of oil.
They know they're dead within the next 50 years. They know
That's
they're
exactly
dead.
right.
Because oil's dead in the next 50 years.
That's right. And if they
Maybe
don't,
sooner.
the only way they can diversify out of oil is that if Saudi Arabia becomes a destination for the rest of the world, like Dubai. They saw the playbook from Dubai and they said, you know what? We want to be a part of that. And we can create that because we have tons and tons of money. And so we want to be able to allow people to come here, to vacation here, to invest here, and we'll create favorable tax laws for the ultra uber rich around the world so they can have property here and let it sit there tax free. And that's another way to shelter money. So they see the playbook, but the problem is in order to do that on the economic end,
They got to
that's
bend
at
the knee.
odds with the religious side.
They got to bend the knee.
That's right. And there's no easy answer. So I would not want to be MBS Mohammed bin Salman either, because he's either going to, have friends in the United States, but enemies within the Muslim community, or vice versa. Neither one of those are enviable positions to be in.
Yeah, I definitely think it's so, though it is I think it's a positive. And here's the
from your perspective.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Whether you want to think it's positive or negative or not, here's the reality. Someone's there forcing their hands. And when is the last time hands have been forced in those areas? Not like, oh, we're going back and forth and diplomacy and kinetics and warfare or whatever. I mean, actual leveraged hands and positions are being forced. People are either being forced to use their hands or show their cards right now. And that's the biggest difference. It's just like watching a football game and you watch a player who creates action, right? Who creates market, or a market maker who creates markets. Donald Trump in the United States, with whatever's going on there right now, call whatever you want to call it. It looks like a duck. It quacks like a duck. It is a mover. It is creating movement in that area, new type of movement, or movement that we haven't seen in that area in a long, long time. And you know this because it's big things like that. Forcing a country to accept those terms and them even saying they're going to do it is absolutely groundbreaking to me by hearing that, because I've been around for 44 years. I've been listening to this garbage since I was 8 or 9 years old. It's the same garbage. It smells the same, looks the same, acts the same. But the difference here is that I've never heard someone force actions and acknowledgments the way it's being done right now.
Okay.
I think that's the big key difference. I don't, and again, I don't know, before I jump back in, because I was going to say this earlier.
Okay.
I don't know the history well enough, and I'm going to go back and study it. I just don't know why Reagan didn't push more on it. And maybe he was just so caught up with the Russia and Mikhail Gorbachev and the falling of the Berlin Wall and East and West Germany and all that stuff coming down, because he was really a key, again, he was a key playmaker, market maker, activity maker for that happening. And if Ronald Reagan hadn't done that, you wouldn't have what you have today in Europe. Donald Trump's doing the same thing in the Middle East, and maybe that's why Reagan just didn't have the bandwidth to do it, or maybe that wasn't the sharpest fire, the existential threat, or the hottest fire at that point.
Yeah. So I would say this. It all comes down to a matter of
you have more adult
strategy.
Perspective on it too, because you're older than me, so you were older than I was during that time.
Yeah, and plus, being a teacher, I had to learn history, so I needed to see the interconnectedness of all of this and stuff like that. And I was also around during the Iran-Contra issues with Oliver North and all of that stuff. So I have a bit of a perspective.
I was crapping diapers.
By no means would I say I'm an expert at all. So for those of you out there in YouTube land, we are just people who have an idea and we have an opinion and we try to base it in fact. So anyway, so going back to your issue with Trump, he looks at negotiations And he often does those tactics publicly. And so because of that, when he leaks information, he's strategic about how he leaks information. And his goal is to strong arm people based on the leverage he has. And that's a very public process. The United States historically in their dealings with Saudis have been very diplomatic, and it's been very much private. So, for example, when 9/11 happened, I don't know how many people understand this, but a lot of the people who were a part of that attack was from Saudi Arabia. And the United States never really made a big deal of it because, one, a lot of their diplomatic interactions with Saudi Arabia was behind closed doors. So it wasn't public information that people readily understood especially if you don't actively study history. So because of that, they didn't have to have a visceral response. That's why they allowed Iraq to be the scapegoat. But the reality is, if you study 9/11 and that, Saudi Arabia was very involved in that whole process. And so a lot of the other presidents have taken the tactical stance of doing things diplomatically and in private. Trump has done another one. So if you like strategy and public, it has its benefits and drawbacks, just like the other strategy has its benefits and drawbacks. Let me explain very quickly, and let's move on to another topic. The benefit of being a person who uses deal making in a public way is that people can see that you're the person that made these things happen, right? So a person with Trump's personality characteristics, that makes sense because he's a narcissist. And because he's a narcissist, he wants to be able to take the credit. But he's also understanding that if it doesn't go through, he's going to take the blame as well. So where he is right now is he's very, very unpopular in the United States. But if he can be seen as a person who's able to be a core lever in pushing more peace in the Middle East, then he's going to get the credit, deservedly so. But the flip side of that is that it takes away his leverage to do things in backdoor channels and do it in a more clandestine way because everything's in public. So the public is going to have more of a say, and what the public says and how they feel determines outcomes of votes. So that's where the downside of it comes from. So it's like I said before, and I'll say it again. It is going to be interesting to see what happens, because even though he's putting that on the table, Saudi Arabia has not agreed to do anything yet. And so only time will tell how this ultimately turns out, because we're talking thousands and thousands of years of conflict. One person's not going to come in 8 years unless something dramatically changes to shift the tide.
Well, I think that dramatic point in the world is right now, and it's happening. And I think that people who control the pieces at the top, they know it. I mean, when you have someone like Elon Musk, and I know Elon Musk is famous for saying wild things and saying things, but when you have someone like Elon Musk come out and say money's going to be irrelevant by 2036 or whatever it was that he said, that means that people know that the world is changing right now, right? And it's people already know what the world is going to be and where it's at, and a lot of us we before we even know, and that I think is what's happening right now. So they are forced, again, their hands are being forced to make a deal. I'm curious though. I'm going to ask you something, Len. What strategy is better? Because I think that the American people, or I think most people, probably not even American people, but I think a lot of people right now today, especially Americans today, they're sick and tired of two things. Number one, they're sick and tired of not seeing everything and knowing where everything and what's happening.
Transparency.
Right? The transparency level in America since the 80s has gotten to be atrocious. Yeah. More and more every year, every decade. If you look at each decade, you look at the 90s, you look at the 2000s, and then you look at the 2020s. Actually, no, whatever, how you ever call that, the decade between 2000 and 2010, and then 2010 to 2020, you look at that, transparency has gotten egregious and atrocious, and all you've seen is the people that are behind all the stuff that they're hiding it from have gotten richer and wealthier and more powerful and more control. And then the people that are working and busting their asses, you know those people. Then politicians like to call them everyday Americans. They virtue signal that we're looking out for everyday Americans. Those people, everyone in America, everyone, even the guy making $2 million a year, has gotten fleeced for the last 20 years, 40 years. And people are sick of it. Number two, people in America and the rest of the world, I think, are sick and tired of being told what to do. We are tired of it. They are tired of it because we see us being told what to do. And then we see these guys telling us what to do, called politicians, not doing it. So I think we've reached a point right now where the whole world is changing. So my question, Len, is what strategy works better? Because a lot of people can argue about Trump and his strategy, but guess what? It doesn't work all the time, but it seems to work more consistently and more effectively than the let's hide in the secret. Because anything that has to be a secret and classified, I understand certain things, right, Len, have to be classified. I understand that. But when you start to see the majority of things are when the more secretive things become and the more it has to be clouded and filtered and shined and virtued and safety and all those crap, that is the big red flag that it's propaganda and some shit's going down. And people are tired of it. So to me, what's more effective, Len? We've seen what's happened for the last 40 years. Diplomacy, not diplomacy in general, but that method of diplomacy versus Trump to come in and go bam. And the last time we had someone that come in and went bam, granted he was more diplomatic, more polished, was Reagan. The last time you had an American leader that came in and went bam like that and you can't say Bush Jr. because Bush Jr. was forced because he had 9/11. So he was forced to go bam like that. But if 9/11 didn't happen, he wouldn't have. He would have done what his dad would. He just would have been calm and just under the radar and non-aggressive.
Okay.
That strategy works.
I'm going to answer your question, but I think neither strategy has been effective. And let me tell you why. So we're talking transparency and negotiating out in front. Hold on, let me answer.
But Reagan was very transparent. He had you filmed the White House. You got to see what he was doing, and he collapsed the Soviet Union and the Berlin Wall, and he was boom about it. So
but there were a lot of clandestine activities that happened during that time because we didn't have as many news outlets and all of those things.
I'll give you that.
So here's the issue though. One thing so I think as an overall, to answer your question specifically, I'm always more for transparency than doing things behind closed doors. But here's the problem, that I have not seen any worldwide global tactics that Trump has engaged in that has been effective so far. That doesn't mean that he's not going to be effective when it's all said and done. But everything that I've seen, like from starting the war in Iran, like I would say maybe killing Soleimani, maybe, but that wasn't really super consequential, except for the fact that the Iranians knew that any one of their leaders could be taken out. So in that regard, that was effective. I'll give that a W. But to answer your question, I think transparency is always better. But the problem is that when you're out there and you're transparent, you have to be transparent in every way. And you also can't make us as the American population think that we're stupid. So Pete Hegseth, I don't believe a word that ever comes out of his mouth because he's just going to say whatever is politically expedient. He came out and announced that the Iranians' nuclear weaponry was completely obliterated. He said it's gone. And then he said we bombed them this was okay. So now fast forward from June of last year to February of this year. Well, shortly thereafter, He said that their naval fleets were obliterated and their weaponry was gone, but now we're still having to go back and fight against them. He just got grilled the other day. I don't know if you saw it or not. He just got grilled from the Congress, and they would ask him point blank questions, and he absolutely refused to answer the questions. And so if you're going to have transparency, you also have to be willing to face the music. And if you don't have the willingness to face the music, then you've got to negotiate in public, operate in classified ways in private, and figure out strategically how to balance those things, because full transparency gives away our position tactically and strategically. You can't be completely on one end, but also hiding under the guise of classified, activity and top secret activity. You can't, then that veils the American public from what's going on. So I think you've got to have transparency, but you also have to be transparent about the fact that some information is classified. Just like the old line that Jack Nicklaus said. He's like, look, Tom Cruise said, I want answers. And he says, you want the truth? Yes, I want the truth. You can't handle the truth. The truth is, Chris, some real tactical activities that's happening, we as a public can't handle the truth. And I believe that some of those things need to happen behind closed doors, but they need to be transparent about when those things are classified.
Well, from my perspective, I think it's an absolute shame, and I don't know why they do this. Why would you even be interviewing Pete Hegseth? He shouldn't even be talking to anybody.
100%, I agree with that.
Because he's a defense secretary or Department of War secretary.
He's the one that goes in front of the cameras. Good looking. He's been on Fox. He's used to being in front of the cameras.
I understand. I think it's a mistake, and I think that you shouldn't be interviewing because who's the top dog in the military? Obviously, it's the president, but underneath
the Secretary of Defense or the Secretary of War,
whatever you want to call it, whatever word, word du jour. I don't care at this point. It's so silly. Like, the English language, if you study it, the transition of the English language over like 4 different transitions, it's so crazy. The English language is translated or has evolved. It's fascinating. You go look at why we say the things we say and why we do. Anyways, I get caught up. They should be. Pete Hegseth is not a statesman. And I don't mean that in a sense that he's not a statesman. I think he's actually a pretty good statesman, right? I think he's pretty good for who he is, but he's a military guy. He should not be out in front of the cameras because he cannot articulate a message effectively that way. It's like if you go back and you watch Eisenhower was a general, but Eisenhower survived and became president because of that era. If you try to put Eisenhower in an era, he would never get elected. Sure. Eisenhower got elected because we came out of World War II and everyone was like, dude, we want some stability, and we still, and he was that guy, and he was a phenomenal president. But under him, you got a lot of government oversight and security and the CIA and spy and all that crap. But it was paranoia. They should be putting Marco Rubio or somebody out there to translate that message and give the transparency, but he can give the transparency.
People trust him. People trust Rubio much more than
100%. But my point to that, Len, is you're probably going to agree, is he'll be able to articulate what's going on without giving away the tactical crap that can't be said out loud. Pete Hegseth can't do that. That's not his lane. He shouldn't be there. He's a general. He should be sitting in the war room or whatever going,
nobody should see him or
how do we end this thing fast? How do we get the frick out of this thing faster? That's what he needs to be doing. He's wasting his time. I don't know why we put him up in front of the camera. And it could be 2 things. And you might like this, Len.
It could he's a narcissist also. So
Trump, it could be that, right? Whatever.
He identifies with that.
Or it could be, and you might like this, it could be just Trump going, hey, the more on him, the less on me.
There's probably a bit of that as well.
so anyways,
I want to change gears, man. And we've talked about this topic in the past, but I want to revisit it because something's getting ready to happen in August, which is the tariffs between the United States and Canada. And so just to give you a little bit of perspective to chew on and give me your perspective, there's a proposed 50% tariff on about $20 billion of Canadian products. And it's scheduled to begin August 19th of 2026. And the stated goal is allegedly to combat Canadian discrimination against American products. And so they're going to be putting tariffs on like textiles and cotton and cement and stuff like that. So
yeah,
what are your thoughts about it?
I think it goes back to my same feeling. I'm not opposed to it. In fact, lay that crap on them. And here's the reason. I understand tariffs are a tactic. They're a weapon and they've never been used. And they have to be used right now. And I'm a firm believer on this until someone can show me evidence otherwise. But diplomacy in this area has not worked. Otherwise, America would not be running the trade deficits that we're running. Still, we're running massive trade deficits, which means we are getting hosed every time we trade with Canada and a lot of other people. It's not just Canada. And Canada wants to constantly lean on we're the biggest trade partners and we've been doing it a long time. We have infrastructure tied in, and I get that. And that's a pain in the ass because we're so close and we've been so productive with each other. We do have infrastructure tie-ins, and that does make it more complicated. And I empathize and sympathize for those people who are involved in those industries that are affected by those, because if I owned a business in those areas, I'd be pissed off as well. But I also, something that I've become to learn as I've gotten older in business is you shouldn't have just one business, Len. You should have a lot of businesses, like a lot of wealthy people do, families do. And then the last point is this, Canada protects industries. Canada protects certain industries, and that's just not fair. America doesn't, we don't do a good enough job of protecting our own industries here, but by default, capitalism doesn't do that. Capitalism is supposed to just let it go. So I think there's just too much manipulation on the Canada side of things, and you're not fair there. We should not be running the deficits we're running. And Canada doesn't want to play ball, and it's for obvious reasons. If Canada doesn't continue to have the trade surpluses that it has, meaning the manipulated markets to hose us, they're going to go broke, and they know that. And that's where I think this has become such a pain point, because Canada has to trim its budgets. For so long, the United States has not had to trim its budgets at the expense of everyone else with their crap not having to trim their budgets. And not just people here at home, because the problem starts here big at home, but the NATO crap and the freaking Canada trade deficit crap and all the other crap that goes on in the China trade deficits. For too long, America has been told, and Americans are told, you got to cut back, and you got to, like, for example, good grief, man, Mondami, lower your thermostats to under 70 or to over 78 to not stress our grid. BS, dude. Tell Canada to turn their grid off and take that power and give it back to us because they've been trade deficiting it. That's just where I'm at with it, Len. I'll throw it over to you.
Okay. So I there's a lot of points that you said that I agree with. And one is that the United States needs to be in a position where manufacturing and the need and the relationship between us and the world, we need to bring manufacturing back to the United States. However, the only problem is that when we look at where our energy and our efforts and our intellect is going towards, it's moving towards AI. And so even you agree that most manufacturing is going to be localized, where we have 3D printing and things like that. And so if you got to think about it, the original reason why tariffs were even imposed was to create revenues for the United States, because back up until 1913, Americans weren't even taxed. And so because they weren't taxed, they used the tariff as a way to generate income for the United States. And so since the nature of that changed after 1913, the way in which tariffs get utilized should also adjust. And so where we are right now with Canada in particular is that there is no benefit to the United States to increase tariffs except for to create more revenue coming from a different source. And so considering the fact that Canada is one of our closest allies, I think there's some challenge that I have with imposing a 50% tariff on them. I think going from like maybe where we are right now and increasing it by, 10 to 20%, I think that's fair, because I think as a general idea, we should have more of an incentive for people in the United States to manufacture those different goods. But Canada's been one of our biggest trading partners. And I think it ruins or it tarnishes the relationship that we have with them. So I'm in agreement with the fact that there should be increased tariffs to if there's a corresponding benefit that comes back to the United States outside of just extra revenues being generated. Because ultimately, as I've said before, an increased tariff on Canada is going to trickle down to the American people. And at the end of the day, affordability is already an issue. And so because we're having more to spend more at the pumps, we're spending more for housing, we're spending more for food, we're spending more for just everyday living expenses, that just adds an extra layer of expenses that we will ultimately have to bear.
Yeah, but I see it as diabetes. I see what we're experiencing right now as diabetes.
Explain. What do you mean?
Or arteriosclerosis or heart disease or cancer.
Okay.
And what do I mean by that? It's the same BS in the medical field. The problem we have today goes back 100 years, 150 years. It's a problem that's becoming a compound problem for decades now. And because we've done nothing about it. The fact that we needed tariffs, great. We should have still worked those tariffs because America has a lot of sovereign wealth, and our wealth and our products and our exports should be creating so much wealth. And it's evident of that. Our GDP, it's evident of that the country produces enough resources for the rest of the world to sell to the world as a company, as a capitalist nation where we don't have to tax our citizens. That's true. The fact that we've had to start taxing and taxing and taxing. I mean, what is it now, Len? You know, it just passed. Did Newsom sign it, or he's about to sign it? You now have to pay a tax on electronic services, SaaS services in California. Ridiculous.
I agree.
Ridiculous with the amount of revenue there. That is my point. We're spending ourselves to death because the politicians know they can keep taking and 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 keep taking. It's completely out of balance. We should have never did to this point. My point exactly. Diabetes is not a problem that, oh my God, doctors go and they treat diabetes as if that's the problem. That's not the problem. You understand where I'm going with this? It's insulin resistance, which means what? That patient did what?
Symptom.
Diabetes is just the symptom of insulin resistance. A heart attack is the symptom of arteriosclerosis or heart disease. Cancer is a symptom of there's a lot of detail there, and I want to get into it, but cancer is a symptom. These are right. These are symptoms. These are symptoms of insulin. And one of the main culprits, when you go back to it, that we're finding now is insulin resistance. So when you go back to this problem, doctors treat diabetes, but they really need to do is they need to tell that patient, look, you need to lose weight, you need to get on a diet, and guess what? And this is why Wegovy and the other one are so successful, because what is it? It's not a PDE5. That's the other one. The GLP-1. GLP-1s. I was going to talk to you. I was going to bring up a funny study about PDE5s. I don't know if you know what PDE5s are.
I'm trying to figure out how make this weed back to Canada. I know you're going to bring it back.
Here's how it works. Okay.
Okay.
GLP-1s are successful because they go down to the root cause.
Yeah.
They go down to the root cause and they treat the root disease, which is insulin sensitivity. The root cause here is not the fact that Canada is our best and our biggest trade partner. That's not. The root cause here is that we're fleecing America at the expense of Canada, at the expense of China. We're fleecing Americans so that these other countries can have a good deal with us. Len, if you and I are business partners, and I hate that word because a business partner is just someone who hasn't found out a way to betray you yet or cheat you or whatever, usurp you. Okay. If you and I are doing business together, you can't say, who cares how long we've been doing business together? If it's a bad deal for me for the last 20 years, that I'm not going to look and go, oh, but we've been doing business for so long. Yeah, but you've been cheating for me for 20 years.
But how does increasing the tariff help Americans?
Because in the short term, it does look painful for us because we're going to go, oh, it's going to raise prices. But bro, we're here at the high prices anyways, and we're paying more in taxes anyways because we didn't manage the selling of our goods and services at the beginning. You have diabetes because you ate too much sugar. You didn't move enough. That's the reason why I brought up the
point, though, that our intellect and our energy is not going towards increasing the manufacturing infrastructure. Even you agree that the manufacturing infrastructure is changing, and so,
but I think it is. So now,
increasing tariffs, if it were the mean to the end of increasing manufacturing, I'd be all for that. Like, look, let's take the surgery in the beginning because it's going to hurt, but in the end, it's going to be better. And I think that's where you were going with the cancer analogy. And if that were the case, I would agree with you. But our time, our resources, even if you take a look at mergers and acquisitions and where all the venture capital is going, it's going towards AI, rightfully so. So I think manufacturing is going to be the stepchild that gets overlooked and ignored in this whole process. So that's why I don't see the connection with tariffs.
The two biggest things is we need money. Len, the United States needs money. Everybody needs money. We can't allow people to take our money and trade anymore and then keep taxing our people Len, I know that you know this because you're in California, but California has officially now passed to the point where you can literally out in open public say that you're taxed to death in California, and it's not even a joke anymore. You are taxed to death in California. You are literally taxed to death. The fact that you now send a message on Telegram and you're taxed for that, or the fact that you have a Microsoft 365 subscription, you're now taxed extra for that. Now that you are taxed to death. So when you look at the tariffs, if we don't back this up, the prices are going to keep going up and up and up and up and up long term. Screw right now short term with the tariff offset, Len. But if we don't get this under control, you're going to have to tax people more and you're going to have to jack the prices up even more. It's just going to keep going in that direction. If we don't get our trade, Len, do you remember this? I don't know if you remember this, but I remember learning about this in junior high school in the 90s about trade deficits and trade surpluses and how the fact the United States was running a trade deficit and it was so bad for the United States economy. Why has that not changed? I don't understand how trade deficits are not a bigger topic. And Trump's been saying this since the 70s and the 80s. We're getting fleeced. It used to be Japanese and it was the Chinese, and the Chinese are still doing it. The Japanese, not so much anymore. But I just think that, yes, we need to figure this stuff out with Canada. But here's the reality behind it. And I'll turn it back over to you, Len. Okay. Elon Musk just privately, do you know what he did? He privately bought a nuclear energy company. And it's a company not a nuclear energy company, a company that makes remote energy production. Basically, what they do is there's these semi-truck things, and they come in their turbines and they burn fossil oil and gas to produce electricity. He bought this company for $1 billion. You know why? Because he's not going to wait for the government to let him build the electricity, or the government to build the electricity he needs to power XII. So what did he do? He said, I'm going to go buy a freaking company that's innovating in the marketplace, capitalism, that builds mobile energy. And he's going to what do you think he's going to do to that mobile energy company? Not only is he going to utilize it to power XAI, because the problem is you can't rely on any of the grids now because the government sucks. Right? Because they're sending that money to Canada in a trade surplus for Canada, right? He's now going to control the point of contact, which is exactly what capitalism is supposed to do, not the government. He's going to go there and take that private energy company, turn it into behemoth, power XII, and grow a business that's going to get us out of a problem that we're in right now. That's capitalism. Meanwhile, AOC is going to twiddle her thumbs for the next 20 years and figure out how he grew XI to a $20 billion company or $20 trillion company. And she's going to go, we need to tax them more. That's the conundrum I think we're in with tariffs. I know I went long with it, Len, but that's where I'm at with the tariffs. Pour it on those suckers.
Wow. Okay. Well,
I'm still going to buy maple syrup, even if it's $20 a quart.
The way we treat our allies should matter. And
but okay, Len, I get you.
Okay, we're done. Wait. We're good.
No. Wait, Len. I fully agree with what you just said there. But why does no one look at the inverse, Len?
Because we're the big dogs.
But how long can we be the big dog for before we run out of money? Look, think about it this way, Len. If you and I are friends, or whatever. Okay, we're allies. We're supposed to be friends, and I'm selling you something, and you find out I'm selling it to you at double the price I should be selling it to you at, you're not going to be mad about that?
Of course, but that situation.
But that's how we're being treated by our allies. Our allies are continuing to expect us to, number one, foot the bill for them because we're the big dog, and then protect them, and then bitch at us when they don't like the way we do it.
Well, okay. Well,
I get your point. I feel the same way in my heart. I'm like, ooh, that's our ally, bro. We shouldn't do that. I get you on that, Len. But then I'm going, why you keep robbing from me, bro? Like, you know what it is? It's the same exact, our allies do to us what a drowning victim does to the person that comes and saves them. You know what they do, right?
Right. They just grab on and
to the neck and then, right? That's what, so I get your point, Len. I want to go out there and help them too, because it's our allies, Len. I'm wired that way, but I can't do that. How long can we keep doing it at our expense? And you and I are paying that expense. The everyday New Yorkers, the everyday Americans, like politicians like to label us as, we're paying that expense. Newsom's not, AOC's not, Chuck Schumer's not. None of these guys are paying this crap. None of them. They don't pay for it. We pay for it. And that goes back to my 2 points. People are sick and tired of not seeing, and they're tired of being told what to do. Anyways.
All right. We could go. Well, that's a dead horse I don't want to beat anymore. So we're good. I'm going to leave that one alone. So since we're talking about pricing, right now in past podcasts, we've been talking about just how the younger generation is having difficulties purchasing a home, right? And so when you look at the interest rates and you look at housing and you look at, first time buyers and things like that, the interest rates have been going up and mortgage rates and the cost of living has been squeezing, especially first time home buyers. In fact, there was a statistic that came out recently that talked about the fact that the first time home buyer for the first time in American history is over 40 years old right now.
That's incredible.
So I just wanted to get your perspective because one of the things we talk about current events, but we also talk about economic issues on this channel. So tell me what you're thinking along these lines.
Well, I don't know. How old were you, Len, when you bought your first house?
I was 24.
Okay, I was 21. So we were right around the same age. And you did that. So respectively, you did that. You did that at a younger age than I did. Because if you know what I mean? Because you're when, things you're doing, you know what I'm talking about? That phenomenon? Like people are slower today than they were back then.
But I think that's what it makes it more impressive that you bought your first house at 21 because, housing prices were a lot cheaper when I first got into the market than when you got into the market. And so, that's way more impressive. So
I had two things going for me. It was 2001.
Okay. Good point.
Okay.
Timing
it was 2001. Great. Timing was good. And I made good money. I was making really good money in IT. So I think those all came together. In fact, it was my brother and I, my younger brother and I, we qualified it for ourselves. We didn't have a cosigner or nothing. It was just me and my younger brother, David. We did that.
And so isn't that crazy? Like that could never happen today.
No, you couldn't do that today. You couldn't. Here's the conundrum that I think that we've gotten ourselves into. A lot of people got used to, in the early 2000s, like we were just saying, anybody can get a house and that whole mortgage thing. I don't think we ever really recovered from that. Then you had a really good market of prosperity, which you did. But then you had this point where just all of a sudden COVID happens and home prices just explode because the demand exploded. The market responded. But the reason why it did that is because money was so cheap. What you had like 2%, 3% interest rates. I mean, car dealers were giving you cars for no interest for 2 years or something like that. It was just absolutely bonkers. And you were getting cheap money. And what happened was a lot of people bought those houses. And now you have all those people that bought those houses and you would expect, okay, interest rates stay high, prices go down, right? The prices aren't going down because nobody wants to get out of their 2 and 3% mortgage. Because if you go and get a HELOC or you go and do a poll or anything like that, you're going to get it at today's rate or refi, and rates are nasty because what's the age old saying? If you get a high rate, you can what? We can always refinance, right? We can always refinance. Well, these people can't refinance now like you saw. You saw so much refinance and so much churn during the COVID era where now that inventory is locked up. Couple that with the fact that to build houses today is absolutely astronomically expensive. Inflation's there. And then the last linchpin, baby boomers own 2 and 3 houses and they ain't letting go of nothing. Nothing. Not a dang thing. So if you're a baby boomer or older Gen X, right? Even someone like me who's 44, if you bought your first house when you're 21, you're like 4 years away from paying that sucker off. And that interest rate was cheaper than it is today. You ain't making any moves on that. And you don't have to. You're like, bro, I got a house. I'm comfortable. Like, for example, the neighborhood I live in, I'm like, dang, these people came up. They bought these houses at 250, 300 in the mid 90s. They're all worth 1.2, 1.3 now. They came up, and guess what? Those property values doubled or went up by 50% in COVID alone. So I think those dynamics are creating it coupled with the fact that wages have been stagnant and the economy is massively changing with the AI influx and all that. It's very difficult to get your hands on something like that unless you are making 250 or more a year. Because to get in it, let's say, to buy an $850,000 house, Len, what does that get you in Southern California? $850,000. What does that get you?
$850,000 house in Southern California. That's going to get you about 2,000 square feet, but no land.
And think about that. That's like right around the cutoff for non-jumbo, right? Like I remember I had my last loan I got, it was like 380 and that was considered a jumbo or something like that. It was a jumbo loan. That was crazy, right? And I was like, dude, you 830 or something is the 835 is the jumbo cutoff. So you're going to go drop that and get 2,000 square foot. 25 years ago, $850,000. What did that get you in Southern California?
Oh my goodness. I mean, you can pretty much get some land and,
right?
5-bedroom house, 3,000 to 4,500 square feet. Easy.
Right.
Pool in the back, landscaping and everything.
In order to do 850 and get 20% down, so you have no PMI, right? You're financing what, 700,000 or something like that. If you put 20% down, your payment's still $6,000-$7,000 a month.
Exactly.
Woo!
Exactly. Yeah, and when you look at all of the other expenses, that's just the sticker price for the house. When you take into account, potential Mello-Roos, when you look at HOAs, when you look at property taxes, when you look at all the other expenses that go along with it, that's just the beginning.
The entry point now is 200 to 250. If you're not making $200 to $250,000 a year, you can't buy a house anymore now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, who's paying that out of college?
Nobody. And that's the hard part, is that the only way that things will change is the price for housing has to dramatically decrease. But I've never seen a time period where that's ever happened.
Never.
Or interest rates have to go down. And because of the inflationary pressures, there's no way for that to happen. And so it's just becoming increasingly more difficult for people. So what's going to end up happening is people are going to, if they want to have a home, they're going to have to move into states that, that doesn't have a real population increase, where you don't have a lot of industry. And the problem is that if you don't have a lot of industry, there's not a lot of jobs. So if you had a remote type of job where you could still get paid and move somewhere where you wanted, that would be great. And I think, to your point earlier, that's what COVID did. I think it artificially shifted the economy, because a lot of people were able to move to different parts of the country, still carry the same income, so if they go from an urban place like a New York or Los Angeles, they move to a more rural place like an Ohio or, Michigan, in some parts where the prices are significantly lower, they could still garner the wages. But then once people said, hey, listen, you need to come back to the office, and now that allows them to have less mobility, people are struggling. People are struggling. And the other point that I wanted to make to piggyback on your point is that a lot of times when you own a home, you have equity built in. So if you want to go from one place to another, you can take that equity, put that as a down payment for your new house. Whereas the person coming in as a first time home buyer, they're having to save up the money. And so with lack of affordability, the ability to save is decreased significantly. So therefore it leaves them limited options. So people that are under 35 right now in today's market with increased prices and increased interest rates are screwed right now, unless you're making, like you said, 250 and above. So the only way to really do that is to become an entrepreneur, get into sales, or put yourself in a position where you start to rise up in an industry that can pay you that. If you decide to go into social services, if you decide to go into becoming a public servant, you might as well, if you're under 35, just either combine incomes with somebody else who's doing that. Otherwise, just rent or there's no other way.
Become an electrician or a plumber or trades. You know, trades are making more than MBAs now.
Yeah, absolutely.
For no college commitment.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this question then. Do you think, put your tinfoil hat on for me for a little bit, just a little bit.
Okay.
COVID was a population control. And I'm not necessarily saying like, the people passing away from it, God bless them. But I'm talking about population control because it accelerated people moving around. Because realistically, if you go back and you look at history, when you have people concentrated in areas, weird stuff happens, right? Meaning nature has a way of population controlling. Like, for example, when you look at Pericles, right? When Pericles was at war with the Trojans, right? Or I think it's the Greeks or one of those two. Anyways, Pericles, he's Greek. I think he is. Yeah, he's Greek. Mm-hmm. And they were at war with the Spartans, not the Trojans. And then all of a sudden
they rode in with the Trojan horse. Yes.
No, not that. Pericles brought everybody in to the city walls and said, "Hey, we'll just stay in the walls, and we're not going to fight. We don't have to do that." Mm-hmm. And then what happened?
Okay, I know what you're talking about now.
Pericles brought everybody in, and everybody was concentrated, and all of a sudden, disease and all that stuff happened. Right now, I'm not saying that that's going to happen today, but how much can our sanitation systems handle if we can start concentrating? Because you look at the amount of people that are densely populated in those areas like LA, New York, the coastal stuff, that's the majority of people live there, right? So do you think COVID was a way to spread people, to forcibly spread people out? And at the same time, it's going to kill some people too. I mean, I know it's a little wacky to do, but think about it. It kind of plugs in with the AI narrative of remote work and all that, because realistically, the more AI comes on and the more jobs the AI creates, I think a lot of those jobs outside of the tradesmen building data and compute power, you're going to see a lot of remote work. I think the remote work is going to become extremely more, not just it's popular, but more relevant just simply because of the way the world is going with technology. What do you think about that? Little tinfoil hat before we transition here a little bit.
Okay. So I think being able to look back gives relevance to that theory. I don't believe that the way in which COVID, just became a pandemic, I don't think they had that in mind because, when you look at Netflix and when you look at Zoom, those stocks just took off like a rocket ship. And I remember I think you had some of the Netflix and Zoom. I knew it was one of those. And so anyway, I don't think, because the reason why I say that I don't think that's the case, because things have shifted back where now people are expected to be at the workplace. And so people aren't working as remotely. I think if that were done on purpose, my opinion, I think that people would have been, at least coerced or encouraged greatly from the governmental systems to the CEOs to say, hey, listen, let's go to this remote workplace. Let's incentivize people because, you have less traffic that's driving from one place to another, and you virtue signal the reasons why it's good. Work-life balance. You can stay at home and be with your kids and stuff like that. But because people went back to work, because I think one of the unintended consequences was this whole idea of cabin fever and the rise in mental health challenges, because there's more cases of depression than ever before. There's a higher concentration of anxiety than ever before. So even if that were rationale to get people to spread out, I think the negative consequences outweighed that. So that's just my theory, just, off the cuff to answer your question.
Do you think it was rehearsed, or do you think it was just plain old simple human chaotic BS?
I think
we don't know what's going to happen, but lock everything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was a bunch of people making decisions that led to that, and everybody just kind of followed. And
I think people took advantage of a chaotic situation to see how far they could push the envelope. I believe that. So what I believe, in other words, is that how can you control a population to tell them what to do through fear? Because there was about a 6-month period where you couldn't walk out of your house without a mask on. So, traffic shut down. The earth was able to, get green again because there wasn't a lot of this smog pollution and stuff like that. So I'm wondering to what degree they were moving levers when the situation took place to see how far they could control people, because all you have to do is say, oh, look, we have XYZ pandemic, and stop going here and stop going there. Stop taking planes, trains, and automobiles. Stay in your homes, because if you walk out, you could catch the next deadly virus. So I think population control is always a lever for people in power to exercise. But I don't think they planned it. I think they allowed whatever was going on in Wuhan to get out there. So anyway,
with chaos, let's with chaotic things going on right now, if fitting here, we'll transition to take us out today and close us out today. Because there's a dumpster fire on both sides. And I think it's turning into a hot mess dumpster fire, absolute catastrophic dumpster fire for both the Democrats and the Republicans, the two ruling parties of America. On the Democratic side, they are beholden now and held hostage by the communists, right? So Bernie Sanders, AOC, Mondami, and all the other weird communists that are trying to make communism work for some reason. Because they can afford to try to think it can make it work here, because they can afford to do it here. Like if they try to go do whatever they try to do anywhere else, they just can't, right? So Democratic Party is being hijacked by communists right now, and they're allowing it. They allowed it. They allowed it by all the woke weird shit that they allowed. And everybody's seeing it now. And they have a messaging problem, and they have no leader. They don't. I mean, there's no leader in that party. Newsom's going down in flames. AOC can't even get herself out of a paper bag. Bernie Sanders is 1 foot in the grave. Hakeem Jeffries is confused and lost. I mean, I don't even know who else the names are. And the other side, you have the Republicans, who they keep dying, or they're hidden because they're dying because they're so old. I mean, God bless them. I don't want to joke about anybody passing away. That sucks. But I mean, realistically, Lindsey Graham just passed. They put his sister in there. Has anyone seen, what's his name? McConnell. Has anyone seen him yet? Or is he like with the Crypt Keeper? Right. And the Republicans are also, for whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, they're held hostage by Donald Trump, whether they like it or not, because the Republican Party is now Donald Trump. Regardless of how you want to spin it, people get elected if they're backed by him now. He just won a bunch of other elections. His guys that he backed are soared through it. So, and they have to deal with, a war and everything else that's going on with Iran. So, but they do have leaders. You got Rubio coming up, you have Vance coming up, you have a lot of other people that are coming up in there that make sense, that aren't wackos, and still believe that boys are boys and girls are girls, and threats are threats and threats are not threats. Where are you at with it, Len? Because it's going to be an interesting midterms, because everybody's off plate here. I think it's anybody's game right now. I do think the Republicans have a slight edge, just because they make a little bit more sense right now when you hear what they're saying versus the other side, what they're saying. Because again, when Bill Maher and Stephen Smith and this other guy come out and say, I don't know what's wrong with the Democrats, you got a problem. You got a problem.
Both sides have issues, and you're absolutely right about that. A couple of things. So Democrats need only a small net gain to take the House. Republicans hold a 53 to 47 Senate majority. And then the Democrats are likely to need a net gain of 4 Senate seats, because the Republican votes would break the 50-50 tie. Okay. So a couple of issues before I bring in my point. People who were polled, it says the economy and prices were 54% of the people said that's the number one issue, versus 28% said foreign policy was the number one issue, versus 20% said ethics and corruption, and 17% said healthcare or was the topic. The most important topic, and 15% said abortion was the most important topic. So here's the point. The point is that there is no real prevailing issue that everybody can agree on except for the economy. So what the Republicans have going against them is that if the war continues to go on and if prices continue to hurt people, emotionally, people are going to viscerally respond to that. And they're going to be more apt to go to the polls to vote that out, because people are more likely to take action on something they don't like versus to go and vote based on things they do like. So that's what the Republicans have going against them. To your point, the Democrats, what they have going against them is take me to your leader. I don't know who to take them to because there's no leader that the Democratic Party has.
Can you do that one more time? Invasion of Mars. Right, Mars invades.
Exactly. And so the Democratic Party has no leadership. And so how can the people who are informed really have faith in the Democratic Party when there's no established leader? But the problem is that we're talking about the established leadership is an issue for 2028. The issue right now is about 2026, and people don't tend to think long term. So I think the Republicans, because historically, if you look at voting shifts and voting swings, typically the ruling party in office, if things aren't going well, get voted out. That's what has happened historically. So if history continues to repeat itself, the Republicans will no longer hold a majority in office. However, because of the fact that the Democratic Party has a lot of rifts within its own party with the rise of the Mamdanis of the world, and also who he's bringing around with this Democratic Socialists of America, he's starting to bring people up. There's a real rift right now between the progressive wing of the party and the more moderate wing of the party. And so I think that the overall population, I'm going to go into prediction mode right now. I think the Republicans are going to lose the Senate. I think they're going to keep the House. I think for the presidential election in 2028, I think there will be a Republican president. Because I just don't think, unless something dramatically shifts in the next 2 years, I don't see anybody rising to national prominence to capture the hearts and minds of the Democratic Party enough. I do think they're going to lose.
I think Rubio's going to get it. I think Rubio's going to be president.
I believe that. I would agree with that because
I just think people don't trust Vance.
Time. Yeah, I agree.
I just think Rubio, when you get, I'm a big Rubio fan, but I just think when you look at him, you're like, just the guy, I think he's ready for it. I think he's ready. I think he knows he's ready. I disagree with you on the Congress thing. I think the House is going to be kept and the Senate's going to be kept, and simply because of this. Okay. You're right. People are short-term thinkers, and they're only thinking right now. And I think Trump knows that. U.S. oil is down to 82, so it's down almost $8 today. So that's good news. The Dow is up. The Spider is a little down. The NASDAQ is down a little bit, but the Dow is 52,000. So
man, gas has been going up and down because remember last Monday I said gas is going to be up to $90 by next Monday, right? But on Thursday or Wednesday, it did get up to 90.
I know, because we were texting and I was sweating, but I looked at this morning, I'm like, Len, what's up, baby? In fact,
let another day happen, man. It's just another swing.
That's it. I think Trump and co is saving their hat trick and their coup de grace for maybe 90 days right before midterms or whatever. And they're going to pow, and it's going to come in, and prices are going to come down, and things are going to be kumbaya, and somehow some theater and some smoke and some
we'll see, man.
But here's the reality behind it. The economy is definitely in a better place today than it was before Trump took office. And people see that, and people are going to acknowledge that, I think.
I really don't know how you could say that. That's another 20-minute conversation.
But we could talk about that. I'm curious about it.
Let's revisit that issue next week when we come back together. Let's talk about the economy. Let's really do a bit of a deep dive and make it interesting for our audience so we can have our banter, but then also teach them a couple of things about different concepts within the economy.
I agree.
So with that, Chris, man, it's always a pleasure to have a conversation with you. What are your last parting words before we bid farewell to our audience?
Go USA, baby.
Love it, man. Well, hey, with that, if you like our information, subscribe. We always want to hear your feedback in the comment section as well. Till then, everybody, be safe. Take care.
Conversation has given you clarity on your next steps. Please share this episode with someone who's walking the same path. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss future episodes. And remember, planning ahead isn't just prudent, it's an act of care. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on the Family Office.